Tuesday, September 10, Gethsemane. Read Mark chapter 14, verses 32 to 42. What did Jesus pray in Gethsemane, and how was the prayer answered? Mark chapter 14, beginning at verse 32. They went to a place called Gethsemane, and Jesus said to his disciples, "Sit here while I pray." He took Peter, James, and John along with him, and he began to be deeply distressed and troubled. "My soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death," he said to them. "Stay here and keep watch." Going a little farther, he fell to the ground and prayed that, if possible, the hour might pass from him. "Abba, Father," he said, "everything is possible for you. Take this cup from me, yet not what I will, but what you will." Then he returned to his disciples and found them sleeping. "Simon," he said to Peter, "are you asleep? Couldn't you keep watch for 1 hour? Watch and pray so that you will not fall into temptation. The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak." Once more he went away and prayed the same thing. When he came back, he again found them sleeping, because their eyes were heavy. They did not know what to say to him. Returning the third time, he said to them, "Are you still sleeping and resting? Enough, the hour has come. Look, the Son of Man is delivered into the hands of sinners. Rise, let us go. Here comes my betrayer." Leaving the walled city of Jerusalem, where they ate the Passover meal, Jesus and his disciples go across the Kidron Valley to a garden on the slopes of the Mount of Olives. The name Gethsemane means oil press, suggesting that there was an olive oil processing press in the vicinity. The exact location is unknown because the Romans cut down all the trees on the Mount of Olives during the siege of AD 70. As Peter enters the garden, he leaves his disciples there and goes farther with Peter, James, and John. But then he leaves these three as well and proceeds further by himself. This spatial distancing suggests Jesus is becoming more and more isolated as he faces his upcoming suffering. Jesus prays for the cup of suffering to be removed, but only if it is God's will, as we read in Mark 14, verse 36. "Abba, Father," he said, "everything is possible for you. Take this cup from me, yet not what I will, but what you will." He uses the Aramaic term Abba, which Mark translates as Father. The term does not mean daddy, as some have suggested. The term used by a child to address his father was Abi, not Abba. However, the use of the term Abba, Father, does carry the close familial linkage which should not be diminished. What Jesus prays for is the removal of the cup of suffering, but he submits himself to the will of God. Compare with the Lord's Prayer in Matthew 6, verse 10. "Your kingdom come, your will be done, on earth as it is in heaven." It became obvious throughout the rest of the Passion narrative that God's answer to Jesus' prayer is no. He will not remove the cup of suffering, because through that experience, salvation is offered to the world. When you face hardships, it is encouraging to have friends who support you. In Philippians 4:13, Paul talks about doing all things through the one who strengthens him. "I can do all this through him who gives me strength," it reads. Many forget Philippians 4:14, where the apostle begins, "Nevertheless." It reads, "Nevertheless, it was kind of you to share my troubles." This is what Jesus desired in Gethsemane. 3 times he came seeking comfort from his disciples. 3 times they were sleeping. At the end, he arouses them to go forth with him to face the trial. He is ready. They are not. This lesson was read by Dr. Percy Harrold for Christian Services for the Blind. Sponsored by the Sabbath School Department and distributed through Hope Channel Australia, this podcast is also redistributed by Hope Channel Germany, Christian Record Services for the Blind. It is also available on SoundCloud and through multiple podcast distributors, including Apple iTunes. And you can listen and watch at the same time on YouTube. Remember, God is always faithful.